everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And today, as seen in the thumbnail, I will be discussing the five modern Doctors of the show since the TV show's revival in 2005. Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and Jody Whittaker, specifically in that order, paying no attention to the order they were placed in that image. But before we get started, before we get into that part of the show today, this is something that I've been doing for like 2 or 3 episodes up until this point, and I kind of like it. It's kind of becoming a regular thing, so I'm going to try my best, if it's possible, to do this every single episode. And what I'm talking about is we had a couple of birthdays in the past week since last week's show on Monday, which was the 30th, I think, the 30th of January, no, 31st. Okay, so we had a couple of birthdays. Most recently, on February 5th, we had the birthday of Mr. Michael Sheen, who, for those of you who don't know, he voiced the character House in the episode The Doctor's Wife. We also have had on February 3rd the birthday of Mr. Warwick Davis, who, as seen in this picture here, has played Emperor Porridge in the episode Nightmare in Silver. He's also part of a very small exclusive list of people who have actually appeared in both Doctor Who, Star Wars, and Harry Potter. Not many actors can claim that honor. However, the big one, the major one, the one I really want to focus on right now is February 1st. We had the birthday of the one, the only, the late, great Elizabeth Sladen, who, for those of you who don't know, she played Sarah Jane Smith, originally from 1974, from the episode The Time Warrior, back in the John Pertwee era, an episode we discussed last week on last week's episode, and she continued to play the character all the way to The Hand of Fear, another episode we discussed last week. In the Tom Baker era, she returned to reprise her role in a proposed pilot that never actually made it to a full series called K9 and Company, which is actually the episode that explains how and why she got K9, why does she have K9 in the modern series. Her and K9 also returned, K9 briefly, but she actually returned for the full episode of The Five Doctors, the 20th anniversary special, and she also came back once again for Dimensions in Time. She then came back in several of the episodes we're going to discuss today in the David Tennant era, and she then got her own show, The Sarah Jane Adventures, which also featured, to a degree, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, played once again by Nicholas Courtney, his last time playing the character on camera, as well as David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, and Matt Smith is the 11th Doctor, alongside Katie Manning as Josephine Jo Grant, or rather Jo Jones, as she's now known in the canon of the show. So, I just wanted to give Elizabeth Sladen the honor she deserves. She is easily my personal favorite companion of all time, and in my opinion, the gold standard of companions that all other companions in Doctor Who should be judged by. So, on behalf of myself and the entire Northern Entertainment Group YouTube channel, I would like to wish the late, great Elizabeth Sladen a belated happy birthday, and my condolences to her surviving family members and friends. So thank you, Elizabeth. We quite literally could not have done this without you. Right. I have no idea how I'm supposed to recover from that. There is a reason I kept the picture on for as long as possible, and made sure nobody can see my face. Let's just put it that way and leave it at that. But now it's time for me to actually discuss the modern era of the Doctors. Obviously, I will be giving a brief discussion on, and I say brief, I literally mean as brief as I can make it, a brief explanation of each individual Doctor, and a very quick, rapid fire of all the episodes that I would recommend people starting Doctor Who for the first time to watch, or at least, or other episodes that I personally consider to be my favorites, other episodes I consider to be the best among the fandom, despite my personal opinions not quite matching other people's opinions on those episodes. And just episode I strongly recommend rewatching, just for fun. So obviously we're going to start with the Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston. Officially, he only had one series, obviously, or season, depending on who you ask. But yeah, his run was not quite smooth. He originally he worked with Russell T Davies, who is the person who brought the show back and is now returning to showrun it again in its 60th anniversary. He worked with him on another project. I believe it was called The Second Coming. And as soon as he heard that they're bringing Doctor Who back and that Russell T Davies is behind the wheel for that one, and he's a massive Doctor Who fan of old. He was a big fan of the Patrick Troughton era. As a matter of fact, that's his favorite Doctor. So he immediately gave a phone call to Russell T Davies, asking him to book him an audition for that one. And a couple of auditions later, with a plastic hand and with Billy Piper, he was cast as the Ninth Doctor. Unfortunately, he let's just say did not have a smooth day at the office with Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner and Phil Collinson, I believe, and a couple of other of the big wigs at the BBC at the time, the people who were specifically running Doctor Who, and he constantly clashed with the people in charge, and it was sort of decided unceremoniously to remove him from the property. And obviously there was the fake BBC statement that he was getting tired, and he did not take too kindly to that. So that's the main reason he refrained from returning to Doctor Who for a very long time. He even refused to return to the 50th anniversary special, which is a creative decision that forced Stephen Moffat to, which led to the creation of the War Doctor. More on him next week. But yeah, so his relationship with the BBC has still remained bitter. He's done a lot of other shows for a lot of other networks, but he simply refused to go back to Doctor Who until fairly recently, when Big Finish brought him back as the Ninth Doctor for a series of Big Finish episodes. And I dare say that he has not lost a step. Him getting tired is nothing but just, as Taco would say, superstitious gobbledygook. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but yeah. So he is still the Ninth Doctor, in my opinion. His Big Finish episodes are incredible, and I cannot wait to listen to more of them. Now, actually going into televised episodes of the Ninth Doctor, this is a Ninth Doctor that has just survived the Time War. He's even still wearing a form of a leather jacket, which is what the War Doctor used to wear for the majority of the war. And he's being forced to come to terms with all the horrors he saw and witnessed and done in the Time War, and obviously at the end of the Time War, where he was forced to use the ultimate super weapon called the Moment to destroy Gallifrey and the Daleks along with it. And his run is mostly very conflicted with the decisions of his own past. His very first episode is the episode Rose, which conveniently enough also introduced his first and arguably, I would say, signature companion, Rose Tyler. It's also an episode that brought back the Autons for the modern series. We discussed last week how big it was that he actually chose to introduce these villains into the modern era as like the first villains of the episode of the modern series of the show, which is great. His follow-up episode, another really great one, The End of the World, an episode where we get to learn a bit more about the Time War slightly and time and the Doctor himself. For those of you who haven't watched the original classic series, this is like the first intricate look into who the Doctor is, much better than the previous episode. Even they use the word Time Lord for the very first time. Skipping ahead a few episodes, we have Dalek, the introduction of the Daleks back into the modern era of the show, which also gives us, for the time being, the biggest inside look into the Time War and what the Doctor has done in that particular time period of his life. Father's Day is an honorable mention for me. It is a great episode featuring Rose, and it's a great episode about Rose Tyler's backstory and family, and it's a great also episode about the dangers of messing with time travel. Arguably considered to be Eccleston's best episode is The Empty Child / The Doctor Dances. And yes, I will be considering two-parters as just one episode because it saves time and it also saves space for images on the StreamYard thing. But yeah, "Are you my mommy" has become quite the iconic phrase from the show, among others. An episode that gets an honorable mention from me is the episode Boomtown, and his final episode, The Parting of the Ways, and Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways is a great Dalek story, and it's a great character moment, and it's a great character arc for the Ninth Doctor, who has been arguably one of the more conflicted Doctors, especially in the modern era. Now, I would just like to bring up a very fun fact that, and this is an excellent segue to the next Doctor, David Tennant. Here's the fun fact. So David Tennant, for those of you who don't know, he is also part of that very small list of people who has appeared in Doctor Who, Star Wars, and Harry Potter. He played obviously he played the 10th Doctor, but also he played the droid Huang in one of the episodes of the Clone Wars. He's like a droid that helps young Padawans and young Jedi younglings to design their lightsabers. And also he played Bartimus Crouch Jr. in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Very briefly, of course. But here's the interesting part, is that in the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire book, his character, Barty Crouch Jr., dies at the hands of a Dementor in a chapter called The Parting of the Ways. And his 10th Doctor is introduced into the Doctor Who universe in an episode called The Parting of the Ways, which is a bit weird and funny how wibbly wobbly, timey wimey this coincidence happened. So I just felt like I wanted to point that out. Now, David Tennant is, I mean, it's no secret at this point, David Tennant is and will always continue to be my personal favorite Doctor. He is the number one end-all, be-all of Doctors. And obviously, I love all the Doctors, some definitely more than others, but David Tennant is my number one, period, end of sentence, full stop. No one will ever come close to him. And yes, he is a very flawed Doctor. He is a Doctor who has now put the past behind him at this point regarding the Time War and all the stuff he was forced to do there. But he is not forgotten what he's capable of. This is a Doctor that, first of all, he will always, before defeating his enemies, he will always give his enemies a choice. Either walk away or I'm going to stop you. And sadly, more often than he would like to admit, he's forced to take the other option of stopping them, and it usually doesn't end up pleasant for the enemies. And we will see that in an episode we're about to talk, but not just yet. His debut episode, The Christmas Invasion, is a great introductory episode. It's the first time we ever get to see a new Doctor being introduced into the show in the modern era, and gives us probably the elements that set the standard for what regeneration episodes in the modern era will forever be from that point onwards. This next episode, New Earth, is actually the first episode of the show I have ever watched, and it terrified the living hell out of me, and yet I still came back and I still decided to watch the show, and I remain a loyal fan to this day. But this is another great episode that shows us straight off the bat that this Dr. A is very different from the much more aggressive and angry Christopher Eccleston Doctor that we used to have. But this Doctor definitely takes a much different approach and always tries to find the best way to resolve any situation. And if you had any doubts at this point about whether or not this will be a great Doctor, this first episode of season 2, New Earth, cements him as one of the great Doctors, in my personal opinion. Another great episode from the 10th Doctor era is School Reunion, an episode we discussed about a minute ago. With an episode that featured the return of Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith. It also featured the return of K9, voiced once again by John Leeson, I think that's the name of the actor. This is one of my personal favorite episodes of the 10th Doctor era, and that's saying something considering it's my personal favorite Doctor. Another great episode, which I guess should at least deserve an honorable mention, is The Girl in the Fireplace. This is an episode that has kind of split the fan base with regards to the 10th Doctor and the direction from Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat at that time, but I still definitely consider this episode worth a watch. Another great episode is the two-parter, Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. Is another great two-parter. And obviously, you probably knew this was coming, but here it is: Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, arguably considered still to this day one of the saddest moments in Doctor Who history of all time, and considered by a lot of TV fans to be one of the saddest episodes, or rather the saddest moments in television history. From that, we jump into The Runway Bride, which gets an honorable mention from me, for no other reason than for the fact that it's the episode that introduced the wonderful character known as Donna Noble into the show. And then, from that, we jump on to the episode that introduced my personal favorite companion of the 10th Doctor era. Obviously, I said it before, my personal favorite companion is Sarah Jane Smith, and will always continue to be. But Martha Jones is definitely very much up there. In this episode, Smith and Jones is the episode that introduced Freema Agyeman as Martha Jones, soon to be Dr. Martha Jones, and also it's an episode that introduced the Jedoon into the Doctor Who mythos. It's immediately followed by the Shakespeare Code, another really truly great one, which gets an honorable mention from me on this list. Another honorable mention for me is the episode 42. It's a great structured episode. It's sticking with its namesake. It's basically a 24, an episode of the popular show 24, just done in the Doctor Who style, and instead of 24, it's 42, because that's about as long as an episode of the show. And also, I believe it is the very first Doctor Who episode that was written by Chris Chibnall, and it's a really great one. And whenever we get these, you're going to see these a lot from me personally, but whenever we get to talk about these truly great episodes that were written by Chris Chibnall, I'm going to have to point it out and highlight them, because I think people have forgotten that when Chris Chibnall really sets his mind to it, he can actually make truly great Doctor Who episodes on his own. Another truly great and amazing episode, and a very great episode for the companion Martha Jones, and it's an episode that truly shows why Martha is, in my opinion, the best David Tennant companion. Obviously, I'm not specifically counting Sarah Jane in that conversation, because obviously, like I said, Sarah Jane, my personal favorite companion ever, but while she has traveled with multiple doctors, it kind of rules her out as being the best David Tennant companion, because she only appeared with alongside David Tennant for a handful of episodes. So in my opinion, the best David Tennant companion, and some might argue that, is Martha Jones. And this episode truly shows exactly why, and it's a great episode that really fleshes out the limits of the abilities of a Time Lord, and really it's an episode that shows us exactly what the Doctor is capable of when he wants to. And the the part right at the very end there where the Doctor punishes the family of blood. Sorry, I forgot to mention the name of the episode is Human Nature and the Family of Blood. But when he punishes the family of blood and gives them their just rewards, it is still considered to be one of the darkest moments in Doctor Who history. An episode that I have seen many people suggest, people who have never seen a single episode of Doctor Who, would this will be the episode to start with, is the episode Blink, which also is the episode that features the debut of the Weeping Angels and also the character of Sally Sparrow, which was a character originally conceived by Stephen Moffat way before this episode, but for some reason he just has an affinity for this particular name, so he decided to put this character in this episode. Also, this episode feature this character Sally Sparrow is played by Carey Mulligan, which I believe was at one point considered to return as a full-time companion of the Doctor, but shortly after this episode, she really blew up and became a much bigger actress, and I guess the BBC just couldn't afford her, which is a dang shame because she was a really great character, and this was one of the best episodes of Doctor Who ever. Some might call it the best David Tennant episode. I personally do not consider that to be the case, but it is definitely one of the greatest. And for a very long time, this was my personal favorite episode featuring the Weeping Angels. And we will get to the one that dethroned him later in this very same episode. But then we have to talk about the triple parter finale, Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords. It's an episode, and yes, I do consider that I do consider it a three-parter episode, a trilogy, if you will. But I cannot see them as separate episodes. I can't see The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords as a two-parter. To me, all three of them, despite having completely different settings for the most part, I consider them as just one serialized story that just happens to be comprised of three episodes that each have a different name. And obviously, I talked about in last week's episode how a lot of the earlier episodes, especially the William Hartnell era, have had individual names for each episode. So, yeah, that's why I consider these three episodes to be just one contained story. Focusing on the Master, this is the first time you get to see the Master in live action, first of all, and in the modern era of the show. And obviously, we've seen the Master in live action before, but since the TV movie, which we will talk about eventually, not in this episode, obviously, but the Master has sort of been relegated to either spoof or animation. This is the first time we actually get to see the Master, played by Derek Jacobi and John Sim, respectfully, in full Doctor Who television goodness, and is still considered to be one of the worst things. The stuff that the Master did to the Doctor, as you can see here in this picture, it's still considered to be one of the worst things, by me personally, that the Master has ever done to the Doctor. The episode is almost immediately followed by Voyage of the Damned, one of the best Christmas special, and obviously the modern era of the show has introduced the idea of Christmas specials, and we're going to see quite a lot of them on this extensive list of episodes. But obviously, we'll get to that we will get to that when we get to that. But yeah, Voyage of the Damned, one of the best Christmas specials in my personal opinion. It is the episode that also debuted David Tennant's new theme music, because for those who don't know, every single Doctor, for the most part, has had his or her own version of the intro theme and the theme music for the show. And this is the first episode that featured David Tennant's theme, and it also features the famous singer Kylie Minogue as a cameo, rather one-off companion for the 10th Doctor. Planet of the Ood gets an honorable mention from me, for no other reason than for the fact that it really introduces, or rather sets up, lots of other things to come in the rest of the 10th Doctor's era. The Doctor's Daughter is another truly great episode that not only introduced the concept of the Doctor being a father back into the show. Now, obviously, in the classic era of the show, we have seen the Doctor be a grandfather to the character Susan Foreman. This is the first time we get to see the Doctor as a straight up father character. And not only that, this is not the kindly, gentle grandfather type character that William Hartnell was. This is a much older, much more rigid doc. Sorry, did I say rigid? I mean aged doctor. A much more well, he's a doctor who lived through the Time War and the genocide of his own people by his own hand, and so many other things that have changed him greatly as a character. And he seems to be struggling with coming to terms with the fact that he now has a daughter to look after. And obviously, his daughter is played by Georgia Moffat, which is quite literally the Doctor's daughter because she is the daughter of um, Peter Davison, who was originally named Peter Moffat. But yeah, the David Tennant and Georgia Moffat fell in love during the filming of this episode, and several years later, they got married, and they have 5 or 6 children now, which is kind of insane when you really think about it. So she's not only the daughter of the Doctor, she's also married to another Doctor, and the 10th Doctor now has his 5th Doctor, his personal favorite Doctor, as his father-in-law, which is just, once again, just like what I said earlier with the parting of the ways, is it's very wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, weird coincidence thing. Speaking of the Doctor getting married, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead gets an honorable mention for me, if for no other reason than for the fact that it introduces the character of River Song, which will eventually become a much, much larger character in the Doctor Who mythos. She becomes quite literally the Doctor's wife for a brief period of time. And today it's Stephen Moffat original character. And contrary to popular belief, Alex Kingston, who played River Song for the most part, she was not aware that she would be coming back to the show. She thought when she was cast as River Song, and this episode specifically, she honestly believed she was just a one-off character for one story, and she was never coming back. And then later, she was brought back into the Matt Smith era of the Doctor, and by that point, even though the stories themselves haven't particularly been written yet, she was the only character. Sorry, she was the only actress who actually knew who her character was. Not even Matt Smith knew the connection that River Song had with the Doctor or Amy Pond or Rory Williams. So it was only in a move that could only be compared to the late great Alan Rickman playing Severus Snape for 10 years on Harry Potter. She was the only one who knew where her character was going to end up, and rather who her character truly was. So it's a very interesting thing there. An episode that I don't particularly enjoy, but is considered one of the better episodes of the David Tennant era, in particular this season, is the episode Midnight, and I believe I've already spent too long talking about that one. The episode does also feature the return of actor David Troughton, Patrick Troughton's son, who previously played King Peladon of Peladon in The Curse of Peladon. Now he's playing a completely different character. Turn Left is a great episode that shows us what happens when the Doctor is not around to save the Earth, or rather to interfere with other aliens interfering with the Earth. And it's also an episode that shows us that the little decisions we make in life, however big or small they seem at the time, can affect so much more than just our own lives. And it's also an episode that really hammers home the importance of the character of Donna Noble and why she is arguably one of the most important companions that the Doctor has ever had. This episode, of course, leads directly into The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, my personal favorite Doctor Who episode of all time. And unlike the previous season finale, I don't consider this a trilogy with Turn Left. I definitely consider The Stolen Earth and Journey's End to be uh, a two-parter, separated completely from Turn Left, the episode that came before it. But yeah, it's a great Dalek episode. It's a great season finale. It's a great companion piece, quite literally, with all these companions in this on this very picture. It's a great Davros episode. It's a great way to reintroduce the character of Davros into the modern era of the show, and it's the best. I have said multiple times that I've compared it to the Infinity War / Endgame of Doctor Who. The next Doctor does get an honorable mention from me. It's not one of my personal favorite episodes, but it's a really good one, and I really enjoy seeing both Davids on screen as a Doctor type character. And then obviously we have to talk about David Tennant's final episode as the Doctor, The End of Time, Part 1 and Part 2, an episode that gives us at that particular time the biggest inside look into what the Time War was, or rather what the Time War had become, that we have ever seen. And it also features the great Timothy Dalton as the iconic character Lord President Rassilon. And it's also a great Master story, even though the Master kind of takes a back seat as soon as Rassilon and the Time Lords show up. But that was the last episode to feature David Tennant as the Doctor, which led directly into Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, my personal second favorite Doctor, and a lot of people's personal favorite Doctors. I have it on good authority that he is the personal favorite of a lot of the people on this very channel, much more than David Tennant. I do not understand how this heresy is allowed to continue, but I will reserve my judgment for the time being. Now, like I said, Matt Smith is one of my personal favorite Doctors. I even have his sonic screwdriver, and actually, the sonic screwdriver is now, it's completely broken. It's in pieces now, and it no longer works. But yeah, this screwdriver, much like the Doctor himself, has been through hell and back. And I'm gonna put this image back because you can barely see my face because of the sun. Anyways, Matt Smith's first episode is, I would say, probably one of my favorite episodes, if not my personal favorite Matt Smith episode of the show ever. The 11th Hour. If you had any doubts, once again, if you had any doubts about Matt Smith being the new Doctor, if you thought he was just going to be a David Tennant knockoff, if he was just going to be a lesser version of David Tennant, think again, because he takes this Doctor into a completely different direction from his predecessor, and he really does open with a bang. This scene is the perfect example of it. Obviously, when I first saw it, it was a weird one for me. I was like, okay, is this what we're doing now? Is this where the show's going now? But ended up, in retrospect, loving it because the rest of the episode was so great that going back to watch this scene in particular, it's definitely one of those scenes that I've came back on, and I am now a huge fan of. Retroactively speaking. The next episode I would like to talk about is Victory of the Daleks, an episode that featured arguably the least everyone's most hated new Dalek design of all time. But ironically, in my opinion, this episode also features one of the better designs of the Daleks of all time. It just happens to be alongside these things. But yeah, it's a good Dalek episode, but it's not one of the best episodes featuring the Daleks. I would definitely give it an honorable mention. Next, we have The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. It's an honorable mention for me. It gives us the biggest, rather at that time, the biggest look into the cracks in the skin of the universe. It features a return of River Song, and it's another great Weeping Angels story. Another good one is Amy's Choice, which is an episode which sort of slightly maybe features the return of the Valeyard character in the form of the Dream Lord, which is played by Toby Jones, which is awesome. And then we have the Pandorica opens and the Big Bang, a great two-parter and a great season finale. It's a great set. It's a great culmination of the entire season, and it's also a great setup for future things to come. And if nothing else, this episode is arguably the best example of the heights that the Matt Smith era of Doctor Who has reached, before or since. Next is my personal favorite Christmas special of all time, of the show, that is, A Christmas Carol, which is a actual Christmas Carol that just happens to feature Michael Gambon as a pseudo Ebenezer Scrooge type, and the Doctor, Amy, and Rory as the ghosts of Christmas present, past, and future, sort of. Next, we have another two-parter that opens with a bang at the beginning of the season, which is a first for the show at the time. We have The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon, a great episode that, in my opinion, cemented Matt Smith as truly one of the great doctors that we've ever had, and the Matt Smith era in and of itself as one of the best eras of Doctor Who ever. The Doctor's Wife is another personal fan favorite of a lot of other people. I don't particularly like it as much as most other people, but I definitely see the value in it and the merits of why people love this episode as much as they do. First of all, it's an episode written by Neil Gaiman, who needs no introduction, and also it features the aforementioned Michael Sheen as the character House, and it also features one of the more badass Doctor Who lines of all time. During a conversation with House, when he says, "Fear me, I've killed hundreds of Time Lords," the Doctor straight up says, "Fear me, I've killed all of them," which is just, it shows us a great representation of this specific Doctor, the Doctor that isn't afraid of anything, and more of a Doctor that wants people to fear him. And also, it's a great retrospective look into the past of the Doctor. And also, it's a bit of a weird line to look at with the context of future episodes in mind. Next, speaking of the Doctor who wants people to fear him, we have A Good Man Goes to War, which perfectly exemplifies that aspect of the 11th Doctor, and also introduces three of the greatest characters in the Stephen Moffat era ever, which is saying a lot. We have Madame Vastra, Jenny, and Strax, a lot of people's personal favorite side character from that time. An honorable mention is given to Let's Kill Hitler, and despite what Ben, my friend on the show, would disagree with. And here we also have the finale of that very same season, The Wedding of River Song, yet another great season finale by Stephen Moffat, which is also a finale that proves that not every season finale needs to be a two-parter. As a matter of fact, when you really stop and look at it, this whole season was kind of backwards, with the season itself opening with a two-parter and ending with a season finale that was just one singular episode, which is an interesting look at this series retrospectively. Next, we have what I personally know is Soda's first ever episode of the show, The Doctor, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's a great Christmas special. I wouldn't say it's one of my personal favorites, but it's definitely up there, high on my list. Next, we have another great opening of another season. We have Asylum of the Daleks, an episode that introduces a character I would eventually grow to despise, but we are not going to discuss that at the moment. Arguably, one of the better episodes of the show, written by Chris Chibnall, is Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Just the name alone should give you a hint at how great this episode is, and the limitless potential that the show has when the writers really set their mind to it. And also, in this episode, introduces David Bradley as a villain, who obviously, for those of you who don't know, David Bradley later went on to play a version of the first Doctor. So we sort of had a similar situation with the fires of Pompeii, where the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, had a chance meeting with Peter Capaldi, the 12th Doctor. We have here the 11th Doctor and sort of the first Doctor interacting on screen at the same time. An honorable mention for me is given to the episode called A Town Called Mercy. And obviously, you knew this was coming. Get the tissues ready. The Angels Take Manhattan, one of the most emotional and saddest episodes of the show of all time. The episode that famously the Ponds left the Doctor and were no longer seen on the show, aside from a minor cameo by Karen Gillan's Amy Pond at the very end of the Matt Smith era. An episode that I love and hate for similar reasons is The Rings of Akatan, and there's a reason why I specifically chose this picture to represent this episode and not a different picture you might be thinking of. But yeah, I love The Rings of Akatan. I just wish that this episode would have ended with what happens here as opposed to something that happens next. That's all I'm going to say for now. Cold War is an honorable mention for me, if for no other reason than for the fact that it reintroduces the Ice Warriors back into the modern era of the show. And then obviously, I gotta talk about this, an episode that I have gone in great detail and saying what I don't like about it and what and why I don't like it as much, but I'm gonna have to put it in here anyway. The Name of the Doctor. And yeah, we all remember what happens at this specific moment. We all know what happens next, and we all know what this episode leads into. Obviously, if you tuned into this show, you knew this was coming eventually, and specifically in this episode, The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special, which featured the return of David Tennant as the 10th Doctor and the full episode debut of the late great John Hurt as the War Doctor. This is one of the best specials that Doctor Who has ever done. Some people consider it to be the best anniversary special. I sometimes conflict this episode with the 3 Doctors and the 5 Doctors. And even An Adventure Through Time and Space is very much up there for me as far as anniversary specials. But when you consider the everything that happens in this episode and the weight of what this episode represents, yeah, it's a little hard not to consider this one of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time. And definitely, arguably, the best special. And then obviously, we have The Time of the Doctor. And I said last week that Patrick Troughton's... Oops, sorry, my ugly face again. And let me just put this image back on screen. There we go. So yeah, I did say last week that Patrick Troughton's very first season was slightly sandwiched between 2 individual Dalek episodes, namely The Power of the Daleks and The Evil of the Daleks, and the best way to differentiate between the two and not get the two confused, because obviously they have very similar sounding names, so how do you not confuse between the two? The best thing to do is obviously to watch the episodes themselves, and once you have the full context of what happens in them, it's how you learn to differentiate between those 2 episodes in particular. I would definitely say you kind of need to do the same for The Name of the Doctor, The Day of the Doctor, and The Time of the Doctor. Just watching those episodes gives you all the context you're going to need with regards to which episode is which, what comes first, what comes next, because the Name of the Doctor is specifically centered around figuring out the Doctor's name, The day of the Doctor is quite literally the 50th anniversary day, and the time of the Doctor is when the Doctor actually spent hundreds of years trapped on Trenzalore because someone took his TARDIS away. And we're not going to take that. We're not going to go into that discussion again. It features a great departure for Matt Smith in the very final moments of the episode, but it also introduces us to the next Doctor we're going to discuss today, Peter Capaldi. In my opinion, the most underrated Doctor of all time, a Doctor that definitely does not get the love he deserves or the appreciation that he deserves. Although in recent years, I have seen people come around and learn to appreciate this Doctor for who he was. It's a shame it comes it comes so late, but I guess even for a Time Lord, I guess it's always better late than never. But yeah, Peter Capaldi, a personal favorite of mine. I wouldn't necessarily put him in my top 5 of favorite Doctors, but I think he's top 6 of my personal favorite Doctors. And I would definitely recommend watching his first episode, Deep Breath. And I love that the episode itself. This is why I love Doctor Who episode names, or rather story names, as much as I do, because there's always so many hidden meanings behind each and every one of them. I mean, Deep Breath, there's at some point during the episode, the characters need to take a deep breath and just not breathe in order to blend in with their surroundings and get from point A to point B unharmed. But also, it's basically just take a deep breath. We just had one Doctor. We're going into this brand new journey with a new Doctor, and it's also a great way to introduce the fact that this Doctor, now Peter Capaldi, needs to take a deep breath as he jumps into this wonderful journey that he's about to go on. So I always love it when Doctor Who episode names are that deep. Robots of Sherwood, I would definitely say that Capaldi's first season is easily the rockiest of every Doctor's first season, and I wouldn't necessarily say that Capaldi's season is high on my list of individual seasons of the show, but Robots of Sherwood, while I do have my issues with the episode itself, which I'm not going to get into at the moment, this episode definitely is one of the highlights of the Capaldi era. And, well, once again, you probably knew this was coming. Despite my better judgment, Listen is my least favorite episode of the show of all time. Despite what Soda is trying to push on me, and we all remember that iconic moment when I said I didn't like it, and Soda decided to go out of his way to prove me wrong, so he decided to list off a whole host of accolades and awards that this episode has won, and I still haven't quite forgiven him for that yet. But, Listen is an episode that people seem to view in high regards, and, well, if you like that episode, good for you. I am never going to admit. The Doctor does some good things in this episode, but overall, I completely despise this episode, and I feel like I've already talked more than I would like about it. Time Heist is a good. I think it's my favorite episode of that particular season. And for the purposes of this video, it's gonna get an honorable mention from me because I'm getting very close to the 1 hour mark, so I'm going to have to start speed throwing all these episodes from now on. The Caretaker is another episode I particularly really enjoy, as well as Mummy on the Orient Express, and an honorable mention for the episode Flatline. I feel like is in order, despite again certain issues I have with this episode. There's some great Doctor moments in it. And while I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Water and Death in Heaven, it's an episode that reintroduces the Master, or Missy as she's now known, And it's a great Missy story, not so much a great Clara and Danny Pink story, and that's really what drags this episode down, in my opinion. Uh, the the Sorcerer's Apprentice and the Witch's Familiar is a great Dalek episode, and I would say the best Peter Capaldi Dalek episode, and it's also a great Davros episode. On top of it, an honorable mention will be given to The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived, for no other reason than for the fact that it's setting up the character of Me, played by Maisie Williams. But yeah, it's an honorable mention. Obviously, you knew this was coming. This episode is, or rather, this moment, this scene is in Capaldi's segment of the intro of this very same show. And by the way, I'm just now noticing every single one of the episodes I specifically chose for the intro are episodes that I have discussed on both today's show and last week's show. So there's a reason why those episodes are in the intro. But obviously, very iconically, the one of Capaldi's best moments of the show, and the reason why, in my opinion, Capaldi's one of the greatest doctors we've ever had, and also one of the most underrated doctors, is the speech. That moment, we all remember that moment. We all remember the speech. That's the speech he gives Bonnie, the Zygon Queen, and Kate Stewart in the episode The Zygon Inversion, which is the second half of the two-parter, The Zygon Invasion. Face the Raven is an episode that gets an honorable mention for me, if for no other reason than because it's the episode where Clara dies, sort of. Heaven Sent is, in my opinion, Peter Capaldi's best episode as the Doctor, and one of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time. It still doesn't quite dethrone The Stolen Earth and Journey's End for me personally, but it's one of the best episodes of the show, and it's much like Blink. It's an episode I would say you do not actually have to watch all of Doctor Who in order to enjoy. It's a very self-contained story. All you really need to know in order to enjoy this episode is just the Doctor's best friend just died and he's really angry. That's all you really need to know going into this episode. And you can just go in cold. And obviously, the next episode, the less said about that one, the better. But the Husbands of River Song, officially River Song's final appearance on the show, unless she miraculously survived and is going to show up in one of Jody Whittaker's last remaining 2 episodes. Fingers crossed for that. But the Husbands of River Song, the conclusion of River Song's story, and the episode that leads us directly into Silence of the Library, where we meet her for the very first time. And yeah, it's the last time that Doctor is ever going to see River again, unless there's some miraculous return by River Song in one of Jody Whittaker's last 2 episodes, but it's looking less and less likely every day. And another great Christmas special, we have, there it is, the Return of Dr. Mysterio, which as a Christmas special, it gets an honorable mention from me. Another honorable mention I would say is given to Thin Ice. It's a great Doctor episode. It's also a great Bill story. And speaking of Bill, arguably her best work on the show as a companion is in the trilogy of episodes, which I consider to call the Monk Trilogy of Extremis, The Pyramid at the End of the World, and The Lie of the Land. One of the best episodes of the Capaldi era, or rather one of the best story arcs, I would say, in the Capaldi era of episodes. And it's a great episode, and it's a great character story for Bill individually. An honorable mention is given to the Empress of Mars. And of course, we had to talk about this eventually. World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls. Originally supposed to be, I believe, Peter Capaldi's last episode before they wanted to push it a little further and give Capaldi one more episode in the form of a Christmas special, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I guess In true Stephen Moffat fashion, he couldn't quite finish the story without tying up every single loose end he felt he needed to tie up in a nice, neat little bow. And one of the best cliffhangers, in my opinion, in any Doctor Who episode ever, and that includes the classic era of the show. One of the best cliffhangers is the aforementioned David Bradley appearing at the very end of the episode as the first Doctor, and the possibilities for what the next episode has in store for us just ran wild. And obviously, Twice Upon a Time is here for a reason. It's a great regeneration episode, and I just wanted to point out a nice, fun, interesting fact about Peter Capaldi's Doctor is the fact that he was his first and last episodes were A, Christmas specials, and B, the same exact day, just uh, a couple years apart. 4 years apart, I believe. Yeah, the Christmas special 2013 was the time of the Doctor, and Twice Upon a Time was Christmas special 2017, I believe. So yeah, Peter Capaldi is so far, still to this day, the only Doctor that has his first and last episode be the exact same date. So that's a bit of an interesting bit of trivia about Peter Capaldi's Doctor. And now, with less than 5 minutes left before we reach the 1 hour mark, we finally make it to the last Doctor we're going to be discussing in this episode today, Jody Whittaker, and a Doctor that I personally believe got arguably the most amount of backlash from the fandom and the Doctor Who fan community, unjustifiably so, if I do say so myself. Obviously, no reason to sugarcoat it at this point. A lot of people were not fans of the Doctor being a woman now, and a lot of people didn't like a female Doctor. I personally don't understand what is people's problem with that. I don't think Jodie Whittaker is a great Doctor per se. I definitely wouldn't put her as high as maybe David Tennant or Matt Smith or even Tom Baker, or even the late great John Hurt. I definitely think she is a really good Doctor and is definitely worthy of the title of being the Doctor. And I think, in my opinion, her debut episode shows that in spades. The Woman Who Fell to Earth it's a great introduction episode for Jodie Whittaker, and just like Matt Smith before her, just like David Tennant before her, this episode being her first proves how great of a Doctor she can be, and she bursts out of the gates. And she opens with a bang, is what I was trying to say. She shows how great of a Doctor she can be right from her debut episode. An honorable mention I would give to the Ghost Monument. It's a great TARDIS redesign introduction to the show. And another great one that I consider to be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time is the episode Rosa, an episode specifically about Rosa Parks. And it's an emotional journey of an episode. And like I said, I consider it to be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time. I would give an honorable mention to Kablam and Demons of the Punjab, an episode that made me cry like a little baby when I watched it at work in front of other people, and then had to give some explanations as to why I was crying as much as I was. Anyways, back to some fun stuff. Daleks, with the episode Resolution, which is the first of a series of New Year's special. Obviously, it's not the first time Doctor Who has ever done a New Year's special, or even an episode on New Year's Day, but it was the first of a series of New Year's specials that Chris Chibnall decided to do for his era of Doctor Who. And don't let the crude design of the Dalek fool you. It's one of the best Dalek stories, in my opinion, and easily one of the best Jodie Whittaker episodes in the Jodie Whittaker era. Speaking of which, another truly amazing episode in the Jody Whittaker era is Spyfall, and we just reached the 1 hour mark, so I'm gonna have to really speed through these. Thankfully, there's not a lot of them left, but this is one of those episodes that definitely shows that when Chris Chibnall really does put his mind to it, he can still, at this point, make truly great, amazing Doctor Who stories, and it's a great Master episode. It's a great Doctor Who episode. It's a great two-parter, which we don't get a lot of these days, especially with the a two-parter that shares that has the same name for both parts. Just part one, part two. And yeah, it's about as close as the modern era of the show has gotten to actually doing a James Bond type story. Uh, if the name itself wasn't enough of a hint, Spyfall and all that. Another really great one in the Jody Whittaker era, in my opinion, is Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. And while this particular storyline in Doctor Who has received a fair share of backlash from the fans, I still consider the episode itself to be one of the best in the Jody Whittaker era. Fugitive of the Jedoon, an episode that not only reintroduced the Jedoon into the fold, and if that wasn't great enough, we also get the return of Captain Jack Harkness from the Eccleston Tennant era and the Torchwood era as well. And on top of that, we get introduced to a brand new Doctor that has previously been unknown. Whatever your thoughts on the episode itself as a whole may be, this new Doctor, played by Joe Martin, is, in my opinion, one of the greatest new additions that the Jody Whittaker era has had in store for us just yet, and I just cannot wait to learn more about her and that particular era of the Doctor's timeline. And next we go into The Haunting of Villa Diodi. I believe that's how you pronounce that, but yeah, it's an episode. It's a really great horror themed episode, which also introduces one of the better characters from the Jody Whittaker era, Ashad, the Lone Cyberman, which then obviously I had to put these episodes on here somewhere. Ascension of the Cybermen, followed immediately by The Timeless Children. And I've said this already once before, but I'll say it again, and I'll put it on my face for that one. Whatever your opinions on the storyline itself may be, and you're allowed to have whatever opinions you have on it, I think this, how should I put this? I think this one-sided, narrow-minded philosophy of just ignoring these episodes and pretending like nothing happened in them doesn't exist and isn't a part of the show's canon is extremely juvenile and, in my opinion, has no place in a modern fandom like Doctor Who. It's no different than the people who had that movement of just remaking The Last Jedi or remaking the last season of Game of Thrones. And it's just, I think as fans, it's about time we grow up and learn to accept that even though we aren't 100% on board with some storylines being told from our personal favorite franchises, be they movies, TV shows, video games, books, or anything else, I think it's about time we just learn to accept that this is the way things are, and there's no reason to deny it. Just learn how to live with it and move on. And that is really the best way I can express my feelings on the Timeless Child storyline, Timeless Child idea of the show. It took me by surprise, like I would imagine a lot of other people did. I was not really on board with it at first, but upon a rewatch and a re-examination of the events of those episodes, I've learned to accept it, and I've learned to live with it. And now I accept that this is a part of Doctor Who now that I'm just going to have to learn to live with. And it does explain a lot of things um, from Doctor Who history, more than you might realize. And rewatching certain episodes with all of that information in mind and revisiting some classic era stuff, it really does open up a lot of doors, and it explains a lot of things, and it makes so much sense within the Doctor Who mythos that saying it doesn't exist is just wrong. And that's all I'm going to say on that note for a while. And speaking of accepting things the way they are and moving on, this is pretty much exactly what the Doctor did in Revolution of the Daleks, another episode that brings back fan favorite characters like the Daleks, and like Captain Jack Harkness, and like, I wouldn't necessarily call him fan favorite, but Jack Robertson. That's really his name. But yeah, Revolution of the Daleks, a great follow up to Resolution. It's a great two-parter, which could have led to a trilogy of episodes like this, but sadly it didn't, with Eve of the Daleks being a completely different story. And there's already an episode on this very same show where I went into full detail on that special individually. Now we move into the most recent season from the Jody Whittaker era, and Jody Whittaker's final season, but not her last episodes, Doctor Who Flux, which I only have, this being a 6-part miniseries, there's only like a handful of episodes I could choose from, so we just went with 2 of my favorites and one that I don't particularly like, but I do think is worth a watch and is worth your time. So the first one I would like to talk about is War of the Santarins. The Santarins are back, and they finally look like Santarins again. They finally look scary and intimidating. And yes, some of them still look a bit short and diminutive. It's nowhere near as ridiculous and goofy as the Santarins looked like in the David Tennant era. And again, I said this last week. Those particular Santarins worked really well for the specific type of story that they were telling at the time. Chris Chibnall decided to bring back the Santarins with an updated redesign that looks a little bit closer to the original design of the Santarins, or what they used to have back in the era of John Pertwee. And one of the Santarins in this episode in particular, War of the Santarins, openly references Commander Lynx by name, which is just great. And this episode is competing with The Invasion of Time for being my personal favorite Santarin episode. I would definitely say that The Invasion of Time is my favorite Santarin episode of the classic era, and War of the Santarins is my favorite Santarin episode from the modern era, right up there with the last Santarin from the Sarah Jane Adventures. But this episode is really making a strong case for being my personal favorite episode featuring Santarins. That's all I'm going to say. An episode I personally don't like, but I definitely say is worth a watch, is Once Upon a Time. Not Once Upon a Time, the show, Once Upon a Time. There's a comma there, a pause. But this episode, more than anything else, is worthwhile watching, if for no other reason than it gives us, obviously it sets up a lot of things for the future of the second half of this season, Doctor Who Flux, but it's the best look we have so far into the life of the fugitive Doctor, played by Joe Martin, and it's also an episode that features one of the more badass Jodie Whittaker costumes with this black jacket that I wish Jodie Whittaker would wear at least one more time before her departure from the show. And the last episode we will be discussing today is Village of the Angels. Despite what my colleagues on this channel may claim, this episode is great, and it does something that I didn't think would be possible. It actually makes the Weeping Angels scary again. I'm actually legitimately terrified. Even looking at this picture, I'm actually legit scared that this Weeping Angel, which is coming out of a television set of all things, I'm legit scared that it's going to turn its face towards me and jump out of my television screen and come after me. This is what this is how powerful this episode was. It took the angels, which have been the law of diminishing returns for a very long time, and it actually puts them back on the map and proves why uh, the Weeping Angels are some of the best and scariest Doctor Who villains of all time. And the finale, the ending of this episode is one of the best endings in any episode of the Jody Whittaker era, and that's saying something. And well, that's it. And finally, the sun has moved enough far in that direction that it doesn't completely overshadow my face. But yeah, these are all the episodes I chose to talk about. Slightly less episodes, I believe, than last time. Last time I had like 120 episodes from all 26 seasons. Right now, I've managed to narrow it down to just below 100, which is still a lot. But I mean, that's again that I've said it before, and I'll say it again. That's how much I love this show. I just cannot stop talking about it, and I still can't believe the people who run this channel made the great mistake of actually giving me a show to talk about Doctor Who for about an hour. But hey, that's just me. So yeah, these are all 5 of the modern era Doctors. Next episode next week is going to be pretty interesting because I'm going to be discussing what I call the obscure Doctors, the Doctors that maybe didn't get enough of a time in the spotlight. I will be discussing the Doctors that haven't actually appeared in full seasons. I will be discussing obviously the movie Doctor, Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor, the War Doctor, his immediate successor, the late great John Hurt. But I will also be discussing stuff like Peter Cushing from the TV movies, Rowan Atkinson. Sorry, I had a hiccup there. Rowan Atkinson from the spoof Doctor Who. A lot of various other spoof doctors that maybe you haven't even considered yet, and just a lot of just obscure stories within the Doctor Who timeline that maybe you haven't heard of, and maybe you wish you haven't heard of. But that's really why I'm here for, to teach people about Doctor Who my way. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you have, I would highly appreciate if you would leave a like on this video and a comment down below. Share this video with your friends. Share this thing around. Help us get this show to a much wider audience, as wide as we can get. If you enjoyed me personally, I just did a massive rebranding on my YouTube channel. Hold on. Suppose I could bring this up right now. I got time. I just did a massive rebranding on my personal channel, YouTube channel that is. This is my brand new logo designed by the incredible Luke from Galaxy Geeks. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I'm going to be doing some very interesting stuff on my YouTube channel going forward. 50 Shades of Geek is the name of the YouTube channel. I've also started going back to Twitch after such a long time of not being there for a while. I'm trying to finish Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, and I'm also tying this back to Doctor Who. I'm basically playing a Doctor Who themed playthrough of Brilliant Diamond, where I name every single Pokemon I catch after something from Doctor Who. I'm also on Get Sweaty occasionally when I don't have work, with Soda and Ben, which have been mentioned multiple times on the show. And you can just check out all the other shows we do on this channel. We have a Star Wars show with Evan Goldleader from the Schmodown and Taco, who is a taco. It's called Let's Talk About Star Wars. We have the All Night Taco Stand once a month, every month. We have Mount Schmodown finally came back with Ben and Ryan. We have Schmodown Analytics with Kiwi and Double D. We have You Seen This, where we talk about some lesser TV shows from Doctor Who with Snark and Daniel from this channel. What else do we have? We have all kinds of shows on this channel, and it would mean the world to us if you would join us on this journey and join us for any of those shows. But at the risk of going over an hour and 15 minutes, I'm going to end the show now with the intro that features pretty much a scene from every single Doctor, and every single one of the scenes have been talked about in either this episode, this week, or last week's episode, minus, of course, the movie, which we'll be discussing next episode. So thank you for watching, and Alon Z!